So today we're going to be discussing how to heal from complex trauma. It's a very common question I get. People ask me, hey, how is it that I can heal from CPTSD or complex trauma? And when they ask me this, it's a bit confounding because it's like walking up to LeBron James and saying, hey, tell me about basketball. It's not that he's not an expert on it, but he'll want to know, what aspect of basketball do you want to know about? Do you want to know technique, dribbling, shooting? Do you want to know about the business side of basketball, about the industry of basketball? What exactly do you want to know about? And I'd be happy to share with you. In the same way, but even more so, healing from complex trauma is complex. There are a lot of aspects to it. So when we ask the question, well, how do I heal from complex trauma? It's not a question I can answer just in 30 seconds. Healing a mental illness, healing personality disorder, healing a psychiatric disorder, all of these things come down to a number of components, not just one simple fix. So if you had in mind that there would be like a magic pill or something you can take, that doesn't exist. There's not one pill you can take that's going to heal you from a mental illness. Likewise, just simply going to a therapist and talking out your issues likely won't heal you from a mental illness or a psychiatric disorder. So how do you heal? Because I've openly spoke about the success I've had in my healing program in helping people to be able to recover from complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is the root of so many other psychiatric disorders, such as generalized anxiety, depression, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder, and so on. So at the root of so many mental illnesses is trauma. So how am I helping people to heal from trauma? And what will the healing process be like for you who desires to heal from complex trauma? It's a good question, but it deserves a very good answer. So if I were to break it down to make the healing process simple by looking at the core components, all mental illness and psychiatric disorders come down to disordered beliefs, disordered thinking, and disordered behaviors. When you no longer have disordered beliefs, disordered thinking, and disordered behaviors, you are cured from your mental illness or your psychiatric disorder. Sometimes we have the impression that in order to heal from trauma, we have to go back to the trauma and we got to relive the trauma and live in that experience. That may not be necessary. In most cases, with survivors I work with, we don't have to spend a lot of time dwelling on and reliving the traumas that they experienced. We need to attack the symptoms of the resulting disorder. Just like if you were in a horrific car accident and you were healing from the car accident, the key is not to go back to the scene of the accident and review how the car hit you and relive the experience. It's not to go back into your mind and re-talk about the experience. That's not the healing process for the body. The healing process for the body is, if the leg is broken, get the cast for the leg. If you need physical therapy, learn to reuse those muscles and target those places where you need to learn how to move and function again as you once could. Likewise, in healing mental trauma, it's not as necessary in all cases to go back to the original experience and go back to reliving the mental trauma. What's more necessary is to look for the symptoms of the psychiatric disorder. And in targeting the symptoms of the psychiatric disorder, in targeting the symptoms of the mental illness or the personality disorder, then we're able to heal the individual issues. Does that make sense? So we have to be able to change the beliefs, the thinking, and the actions. It is simple when you look at it by those three components, but then you can also understand why the current psychological industry, the mental health industry, has a lot of trouble actually having success in healing these things, because medicine does not address the beliefs, the thinking, and necessarily the behavior. Medicine addresses chemicals. And they're hoping that by altering the chemical state of your body, they can change the way you feel, which has some truth to it. You're going to feel different if you have different chemicals, because chemicals do produce feelings inside of us. But if you don't deal with the disordered beliefs, you are still traumatized. If you don't deal with the disordered thinking, if you don't deal with the disordered behavior and learn a new way, then you are not healed. So how do we heal the disordered thinking, beliefs, and behaviors? It is by learning the proper disordered beliefs, thinking, and actions that we need to take. Let me illustrate this. Imagine, for example, if there was a man who believed that there was no such thing as gravity. So having that belief, there's no such thing as gravity. Can you imagine how that may lead to disordered behavior? Because his thinking, because his belief is not helpful, untrue, and dangerous, his actions will now become more risky, less healthy, and more dangerous. So he may go and climb something high and tell himself, I can walk off of this, I can jump off of this, because there is no such thing as gravity. He's got a disordered belief. It's dangerous for him. Now he's going through life thinking that he can just jump off of the ground and fly away like Superman, but he cannot. This is a disordered way of thinking, or a disordered belief, which will lead to a disordered way of thinking, which will lead to disordered behaviors. So how do we cure his mental illness? Because certainly you would say a man who believes that there is no gravity has a mental illness. Well, this confounds the psychological community, who will sit and let him speak for hours about how there is no gravity. Many of them will try to visit back to his childhood. Many of them may assign him a medication to control his behavior, or they'll lock him in a facility. But that doesn't cure the illness. What cures the illness? If a wise therapist sits down with that man and is able to work with him day in and day out and convince him beyond the shadow of a doubt that gravity does exist, and help him to understand what the consequences of disobeying gravity are, it is at that moment that he accepts that gravity does exist, that his mental illness is cured, because his behavior will no longer be disordered, because his thinking will no longer be disordered, because his belief is no longer a disordered belief. Does that make sense? So it's by sitting down and helping him to readjust his belief. Now, with most of the survivors that I work with, they don't have something as obvious and extreme as believing there's no such thing as gravity. In fact, many feel a sense of shame because they feel like they're crazy, or they feel like they're stupid for having a disordered belief or disordered thinking. And they may shy away from therapy and talking about it and revealing themselves for those reasons. But you should not feel like you're crazy, and you should not feel like you're stupid. The clients that I work with are not crazy or stupid. They are traumatized. There's a reason why you may have the disordered beliefs, the maladaptive way of thinking. For most, because of the trauma you experience, you just maladapted to that trauma. So we think of an example like someone who's grew up in a street gang. So imagine they grew up from childhood to adulthood, being in a kill or be killed mentality, living in the streets. And so they constantly had to watch their back. They had to be hyper vigilant. Almost everyone around them was dealing in nefarious and malicious intent. And they have to constantly worry about who's plotting and scheming against them. They could get killed at any time. They're doing high risk behaviors, and they need to assert themselves as being tough because it is a protection for them. Now imagine if you take that person right out of that street life and you place them smack dab in an affluent area, in an office building, in an office job, or in a nursery taking care of toddlers. Can you already start to imagine how they may not be well adjusted right away to how they're supposed to respond there? And so they're in the office environment, but they're getting in fistfights. It's like, why are you so aggressive? This is not appropriate in an office environment. Well, that person dissed me. They disrespected me. Well, here in an office environment, when someone disrespects us, we don't punch them in the face. We send a strongly worded email or bring it up to HR. He has to learn a whole new way of thinking in order for him to adapt in that environment. He is not stupid. That person is not crazy. That person is maladapted to this environment. Does that make sense? So don't regard yourself as broken. You adapted to survive in the environment that you grew up in or were traumatized in, which may have been with a caregiver that was inadequate, that did not show up for you emotionally, with a caregiver that did not provide for your emotional needs, that did not validate you every day, did not make you feel special, did not make you feel loved, or was abusive in the way that they loved you. And so in order to survive in that environment, you as a child had to come up with a different way of thinking, a different way of behaving. A common maladaptation that will come out of those types of environments is a people-pleasing behavior. So you learn to be a pleaser to manage the erratic emotions of your caregiver, so you could avoid their punishing reactions, or you could appease them and perhaps get some drops of love and validation, and then you go into the real world with that. And it's not as obvious as believing that gravity doesn't exist, but it's still maladaptive, and it starts to manifest itself over time. Now, at first, you may be getting good grades and the teachers may like you, but you become the teacher's pet and you find that you're getting bullied. And you're wondering, now, why am I getting bullied? And you realize, well, it's almost because I'm a teacher's pet and I'm getting good grades, but really it's that I'm showing up into the world as having weak boundaries and wanting to please and appease others, instead of having a strong sense of self and ego. And so I'm going to have to learn assertiveness. And so that's an example of how you go into the world with a maladaptation. It's not about being crazy or stupid. It's about being traumatized by your former environment. So the healing process is to learn to overturn those traumas, to overturn the effects of the traumas on you, what you believe, the way that you think, and how you behave. Does that make sense? The trauma that you've experienced does make an impact on the brain. Whenever we get into a trauma, we go into alert mode. And then that alert mode can turn into hypervigilance. And that hypervigilance can go into delusion and paranoia. It's not because you're broken. Your brain is actually supposed to respond that way to a trauma. It's that you didn't know how to re-regulate after the trauma. When a person is healthy, when they experience a traumatic event, they're able to regulate back to baseline after at first going into the trauma brain. So imagine, for example, a person gets into a near car accident. So they swerve and they get out of the way and they realize, whoa, that was traumatic. So they're saying, and their heart is beating and they're breathing fast and their eyes are wider, right? And they're looking around like this because they look back at the kids and they say, are you guys okay? And they're touching themselves like, all right, I'm okay, right? And they're looking around to make sure there's no other cars coming and that they've swerved into a safe area, right? This process they're going through is a re-regulation process. but their mind, their amygdala is now hyperactive. All of the energy in the brain is in that amygdala. The amygdala is now sending adrenaline into the system so that they can respond very quickly to the situation. Now they have to re-regulate. How will they re-regulate? They have to change the perception of the subconscious mind to I am safe instead of I am in danger. And so they'll do that by making, are you guys okay? The kids are safe. I'm okay. Okay, the car's okay. Okay, the other party's okay. All right. And they realize I'm safe. Everything's okay. It's not going to happen again. Now I'm going to just pull out very slowly and I'm going to make it to my destination. I'm just going to be more careful. Those experiences can make an impact on a person's beliefs. The person may get home that night and speak to their spouse and say, you know, after that near car accident, you know, it really just gave me a whole nother outlook. I need to be really appreciating every moment, spending more time with my kids, and I have to be more careful when I'm driving or doing something that's potentially dangerous. It makes an impact on the person's beliefs, but all of what I just named is not wrong or disordered. But what can happen when someone experiences a trauma that they don't feel they can handle, they didn't feel that they could cope with, and they were unable to re-regulate, which may have happened because they didn't have parents that helped them to learn to re-regulate while they're developing. So they develop, or they have a developmental disorder, and that they haven't developed the process of learning to regulate themselves. So they go into a traumatic situation where they are assaulted and they come out of it with a maladaptive belief and not fully re-regulated. So they come out of it feeling like there's nothing I can do to ensure my safety because I couldn't stop myself from getting assaulted. And maybe before that, they felt they were being careful. And so instead of saying, I can't guarantee my safety, so it's best just to focus on what I can control and do what I can, which would be a re-regulating and an adaptive belief, they maladapt and say, I can't predict when and where this is coming from, so I have to always be watching and always be ready and be hyper vigilant in order to ensure my safety. I have to try to control everything and see everything, even before it happens. And so this hypervigilance turns into almost a delusion, a paranoia, because they're watching, and then they begin assuming. So they say, you know what, these people are acting like they're not going to assault me. But if I just assume that they are going to assault me, then I know that they're going to assault me before they assault me. And then that way I can keep myself safe. So then they begin assuming. So they have negativity mindset. They're looking at the world through a negativity lens, right? This is all a maladaptation to the trauma. And they feel like they're keeping themselves safe. Our maladaptive beliefs are developed for that reason, because we believe that it would keep us safe. We're looking at it as a way of preventing that trauma from happening again. But if you go around thinking that you can think before other people can think what they're going to do, you can read their minds, you believe that you can read their intentions, you start thinking you know people's motives, now you're actually delusional because you're walking around the world believing you're a mind reader, and you are not. You do not have that gift. So it's delusional thinking. And so you thought that maybe it would keep you more safe, but it does not. So when you're in the trauma healing program and you're working with me, you learn that you have to adapt a different belief system around trauma, which is not, I cannot prevent trauma and dangerous things from happening, so I need to watch everything, but it's, I cannot prevent trauma and dangerous things from happening all the time, so I need to do what I can within reason, but I need to continue also to live my life, which means opening myself up to the potential that something else can happen, but I will be able to handle it if something else were to occur, instead of I cannot cope if anything else were to happen to me. That is a maladaptive belief. If you believe you cannot cope If something else were to happen again, you begin to tell your subconscious that. If something else happens, I won't be able to cope. If something else happens, I won't be able to cope. When you reaffirm that to your subconscious, you're basically doing affirmations, but they're negative affirmations. And it changes the subconscious mind. So the subconscious mind says, oh, okay, we'll manifest that reality, no problem. You cannot cope if this happens again. Now, two people go into the world, one person with an adaptive belief, whatever happens, I will be able to handle it when I get there. One person with a maladaptive belief, I cannot cope if something else happens to me. And to both people, something else will happen again because we live in an unstable, unpredictable world that's full of danger and trauma. And so both people go through a traumatic event again. And what happens to the person who is regulated and believe that they could cope? They utilize the tools they learned in the trauma healing program, and they're able to cope with it. They're able to re-regulate themselves. They're able to bring down the anxiety. They're able to switch their perceptions, and they're able to be okay again. They get through it. The person with the maladaptive belief, they're telling their subconscious, I can't cope, I can't cope, I can't cope. Now they go out into the world with that belief and they face another danger, another trauma. And what happens? Guess what? They can't cope. And so, bam, their whole system gets thrown off. They don't know how to handle their system getting thrown off into trauma mode. And their body becomes sick. So their body develops an illness. And then suddenly they have a tumor. Suddenly they have cancer. Suddenly they have gastrointestinal problems and respiratory problems and cardiovascular problems. Because the body is now having to handle the fact that the mind decided it needs to quit. Or they develop a mental issue where the brain takes over and says, you can't cope with this. And it locks you out. And if the brain locks you out, then you've dissociated. Right? So now you don't know why you're doing what you're doing or where you are, and you're waking up in a 7-Eleven sometimes without half of your clothing. And you wonder, why did I act that way? Why did I go crazy? Because you were teaching yourself that you couldn't cope. It is a maladaptation. So the healing process is learning that you can cope, which is an adaptive belief, and how to cope so that you do believe, and you can believe with confidence that you can cope with the next trauma, instead of going out into the world trying to prevent the next trauma from happening. That's maladaptive. There's always going to be another challenge down the line. Does that make sense? So we want to get away from the maladaptive beliefs and change those beliefs, get away from the maladaptive thinking and change that thinking, and get away from the maladaptive behavior. So how exactly am I successful in doing this? I spend the time with you working on changing your beliefs, just the maladaptive ones, not all of them, because you have some good beliefs. Like you recognize that the stove can be dangerous. That's a good belief. You recognize that you should wear sunblock in the sun. That's a good belief, right? So we're going to keep the good beliefs, but we got to go in and we got to change around and switch up the beliefs that are causing you to no longer be able to adapt in life, that are giving you high anxiety, high depression, to the point where you're fearing fear because the anxiety is so intense that you actually have anxiety about having anxiety. You get sad about depression. So you're sad about sadness. Oh my gosh, I have this depression and that makes me sad. The further you go down that road, the more disordered you become. But you can turn that car around. You can drive the other direction by doing the work that is required in healing. What work is that? Well, when you work with a skilled therapist, preferably one that is trained by me, that therapist will work with you and your mind the same way a physical therapist will work with you and your body. A physical therapist specializes in helping you to regain all of the movement of your body, all of the function of your body, so that you can adapt and live your life to the highest quality possible. A mind therapist helps you to learn how to use the apparatus of the mind so that you can adapt and live the highest quality life possible. Your conscious mind is separate from your subconscious mind. There are two parts to it, and you are the conscious mind. So when you understand that you are the conscious mind and you understand how to be the conscious person and how to exercise your personal choice, then you are living in your power. When you're living in your power, you have the power to heal your own brain. And that's what you learn working with a mind therapist. When you learn how to take control of your mind and control your actions, then you can stop trying to control everything else that you cannot control. Because adaptive thinking is to control what we should control, what we can control, and let go of what we cannot control. So one of the best ways to go about unearthing and turning around your particular beliefs is to look at what you are actually struggling with, because not every survivor has the exact same list of maladaptions. Now, there's a lot of overlap. Some have a lot of the same things, but it's not always exactly the same. And it's not always as extreme. For each survivor, it's different. So when some have asked the question, well, how long does this take to heal? It depends. It depends on you. You may have several maladaptions that are developed, so it may take you several months to heal. Also, you may not attack it as intensely. Maybe you're only getting into it once a week, once every week and a half or something like that. So if that's the case, well, it's going to take you longer to heal, which is okay, because you can heal at your own pace. But people can heal very rapidly. For instance, if you have less maladaptions, less maladaptive beliefs, you can heal sometimes 1 or 2, 3 sessions. For instance, that man who believed there was no gravity, if that was his only problem, and I could sit down and I can convince him beyond the shadow of a doubt, and let's say it only takes an hour or 2, he may be healed from that moment on. As soon as he gives up the maladaptive belief, he is healed. For some, they may grapple with something and struggle with something for weeks. We may have to talk about it again and again. But what will put you ahead in the process is going into my website and going to the trauma healing course that's there. So what it is a video course where I've taken exactly what I would tell you in a therapy session, according to your maladaptive belief, and I've recorded a video talk on that specific issue. So you can listen to it at your own pace. That course is $40, and then you pay each month according to how long you want to use the course. So if you want to use it for 1 month, you pay $40, you got it for a month. And you can cancel it. If you want to continue it, then you can keep paying for it as long as you're using it. So when you have access to the course, you can go in on a daily basis or a few times a week, and you watch the video that corresponds to the issue that you're having. So it's organized according to issue. Starts out talking about how to heal in general. Then it goes into anxiety. Then you're going to learn about rumination. Then you're going to learn about depression. But what you're learning about is how to heal it in yourself. So the course is designed to empower you to heal yourself. So when you go through a course module, and let's say you're working on self-worth or self-esteem, and let's say you go through it and it does make you feel a bit better, but you still have some questions that you feel like the video didn't answer, then you go in, schedule a session with me. It's right there on the website. You schedule a session with me. I do the session with you. The sessions are on a donation basis, by the way, for those who are new here. So you're not getting charged directly for the session. We go in and we work on your issue. What is the questions that you have about it? What are your hesitations? What resistance do you feel towards it? And we work on it together. And so we're kind of taking this healing journey together, and you're able to work with me where actually needed. And you can heal yourself at your own pace. You can literally speed up the videos so that they talk faster, or slow them down so that they go slower. You can pause, you can rewind, but ultimately you're healing at your own pace. How? By turning over, by fixing the beliefs, the maladaptive beliefs that were developed from a maladaptive childhood or from whatever your particular trauma was. In addition to going through your trauma recovery program and doing sessions with me or a therapist trained by me, you're going to want to do some work on yourself. The maintenance for the brain, the maintenance for the mind, rather, is 30 minutes a day exercise. That's physical exercise. 30 minutes a day meditation, 30 minutes a day edification. This is not just about healing. This is what someone who has a keen mind is doing on a daily basis to keep their mind keen. Exercises, physical exercise cannot be underestimated for the brain. When we exercise physically, it releases hormones that help with the brain development. For instance, brain-derived neurotrophic factor gets released when you exercise. That's a protein that helps to enlarge the hippocampus. When you enlarge the hippocampus, and you got a nice fluffy hippocampus, that means that you're more resistant to developing Alzheimer's and dementia. Why? Because you're keeping up with your physical exercise. Don't underestimate that in your healing process. 30 minutes a day at least, give it to me. Take a walk, get outside, hit some stairs, hit some push-ups, some sit-ups, lift something heavy, give your body resistance. That is how the body is made to face resistance. It needs a little resistance every day to feel loved. Take care of it. Likewise, you need 30 minutes a day meditation. So I get a lot of questions about how to meditate. And I noticed that a lot of people teach meditation wrong on the internet and in various groups. So I'm going to teach you the right way to meditate on Wednesday. We're going to do a meditation masterclass. And I will go through several different types of meditation and show you how to use these meditations to heal your mind and to go way further than just healing. You get into thriving, creativity, and just being optimal. So make sure you're there on Wednesday for the meditation masterclass. But you need to be meditating 30 minutes a day. I personally meditate hours per day. And we'll talk more about that on Wednesday. And then you have to make sure you're getting 30 minutes edification. Your edification is what you're feeding your mind. It's what you're taking in terms of information. So what are you reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to? Is it stuff that's going to inspire your mind and build you up or not? Because every thought carries a charge, positive, negative. It's all energy. And your mind is an energy apparatus. It runs on energy. So you have to be taking in the energy that's going to build up the mind instead of the energy that's going to tear it down. When you learn how to use the mind properly, you can cope with anything. And please remember, whatever the trauma was, whatever happened to you, it does not take away from your worth. And that's something else that you learn in the self-worth section of the trauma healing program. So make sure you take advantage of the tools that are made available to you. You also have free videos on YouTube. Make sure you're here on Wednesday. We're doing a group discussion. And every Monday. I love you guys so much. I love working with you. And that is the end of our session for today. Take care.